Being a rapper is one of the deadliest jobs in the world, and today we're breaking down the shocking true stories behind the most brutal deaths in the industry. It's always a tragedy when rappers get killed, but one death that really rocked the rap industry was when Takeoff was murdered back in 2022. He was chilling in Houston with Quavo and the Prince family for a birthday party, and at first everything was cool. Jay Prince and his family pretty much run Houston, so being around them should mean you're safe. Everything started with a dice game outside a bowling alley. There were around 40 people standing around watching dudes gamble, and at some point, the situation got heated. It's still not clear exactly what happened, but someone pulled a gun out of nowhere and started letting off shots. At least one other shooter busted back, and that's when Takeoff got caught in the crossfire. A nurse who lived next to the bowling alley ran over and tried to help, but tragically there was nothing she could do, and Takeoff was already dead by the time help arrived. A few weeks later, the Houston PD arrested a dude named Lil Cam Fifth, but they don't think he was the shooter who killed Takeoff. After Lil Cam got booked, they picked up another guy named Patrick Xavier Clark, and now he's facing life in prison over the situation. There were tons of witnesses around when Takeoff was killed, but nobody wants to work with the cops. A lot of the dudes have street ties and won't say anything to the police, but there's enough footage from the shooting that they'll probably get a conviction anyway if Clark decides to take it to trial. XXXTentacion blew up out of nowhere and became a superstar overnight. He was racking up billions of streams and taking over the entire rap game, but in 2018, he was brutally murdered in broad daylight. On June 18, 2018, X stopped at a bank and took out $50K in cash. He headed to a motorcycle shop right after, but what X didn't know was that he was being followed by the men who were about to kill him. A dude named Dedrick Williams had been in the probation office when X was there a few months earlier and recognized X's whip. He was driving around with his homies Robert Allen, Michael Boatwright, and Trayvon Newsome when they spotted X and started following him. When X went into the motorcycle shop, Dedrick and Robert followed him inside and walked right past him to buy a couple black face masks. They walked back outside and waited with the rest of the crew, and when X came out half an hour later, they blocked the exit with their whip. Boatwright and Newsome hopped out of the car and ran up on X. They started punching him and trying to snatch his chain, while X's uncle ran out of the car and left him there alone. When Newsome couldn't get the chain off X's neck, he went to the other side of the whip and stole X's Louis Vuitton bag with the $50K cash inside. Newsome ran back to his own whip and Boatwright started to follow him, but then he turned around and shot X to death for no reason. After the murder went down, a wild rumor started flying that Drake was involved with the hit. He had been beefing with X for a while, and X accused Drake of jacking his flow from his hit single, Look At Me. X started dissing Drake on social media and said his career was almost over. Then he went live on IG and took more shots at Drake and his mom. The craziest part about it was when X tagged Drake on IG and said, "If anyone tries to kill me, it was at Champagne Poppy. I'm snitching right now." Drake allegedly clapped back on the track I'm Upset and rapped, "SMS, XXX, that's the only time I ever shoot below the neck. Why you keep on shooting if you know that dead? That's the only kind of that gets you some respect." Then the week after X died, Drake added more fuel to the rumors when he dropped the track Mob Ties and said, "GLE, cause that Lambo moving fast. S-Class, G-Class, lot of class. And a rocket, and that got no tags. Louis bags in exchange for body bags." Fans went crazy over the theory, but it turns out Drake didn't have anything to do with it. Williams, Boatwright, Allen, and Newsome all got booked for the murder. Then Allen flipped on his homies and agreed to testify against them. The cops had all kinds of evidence already, and the jury found all three of them guilty. Boatwright is the one who pulled the trigger on X, and after the judge handed down a sentence, he proved how brutal he was by blowing a kiss to X's family. Williams, Boatwright, and Newsome all got hit with a life sentence, while Allen only got 7 years plus time served. After the trial was over, Drake allegedly rapped about it one more time on the track Daylight and said, "I wasn't there when they caught the body. TPS think that I bought the body. Internet swear that I bought the body. Take more than that to go pop somebody. Them talk about everybody. So low key, I'm happy they got somebody." Pop Smoke hopped in the booth and took over the rap game in no time. Unfortunately, he didn't even have time to enjoy the success though, because in 2020, 4 dudes broke into his Airbnb and shot him to death. Pop came up in the streets of New York and knew how to move, but when he was chilling in LA, Pop and his homie Mike D posted some pics on Instagram of gifts they got that showed their address. Around 4 in the morning on February 19th, 2020, some dudes who saw the post on IG broke into the crib through a balcony on the 2nd floor and put a gun to the woman's head who was staying with Pop. Then they went into the bathroom where Pop Smoke was taking a shower and tried to rob him. At first, Pop was gonna just hand over his watch, but then he started to fight back and one of the robbers shot him. They grabbed his Rolex and ran outside, and it took months for the cops to find any leads. A lot of people thought it might have been gang-related since Pop Smoke was affiliated with the Crips, but then the news broke that it was just a robbery gone wrong. Jaquan Murphy, Keandre Rogers, and Corey Walker were all arrested for the murder. plus 2 minors whose names haven't been released. Both of the minors pleaded guilty, and the one who admitted to pulling the trigger will be held in juvie till he turns 25. The other minor pleaded guilty and got 4 years in juvie, but the adults in the case haven't gone to trial yet. 3 years after Pop Smoke died, the case took another shocking turn though. In August 2023, a naked body was found stuffed in a barrel at Malibu Beach. It turns out the guy inside was Javante Murphy, the brother of Jaquan Murphy, and the cops think he might have been killed in revenge for Pop Smoke's death. A dude named Joshua Lee Simmons got booked for killing Murphy, but right now, nobody knows if he has ties to Pop Smoke at all or if he killed Murphy over something else. Houdini was one of the most popular rappers in Toronto, and his death in 2020 rocked the city. Rappers who go back to the hood get caught up in bad situations all the time, but what happened to Houdini was way more shocking. On May 26, 2020, Houdini and his homies were out shopping in a rich area of downtown Toronto. It's not the kind of place where you usually have to worry about getting caught lacking by the ops, but someone was hunting them down. While he was walking down the street, a shooter who had been waiting for him for over an hour hopped out of a whip and started letting off shots. Houdini got hit 3 times while his homies busted back, but the shooter got away and left Houdini dead in the street. Then a month later, during the vigil for his death, someone pulled up and started letting off shots into the crowd. Houdini's homie shot back again, and the cops found over 60 shell casings at the scene when the shootout was over. Eventually, they booked a dude named Clay Hobbs. He drove the getaway car and wasn't the shooter, but during his trial, he said that his homie Jack Lord pulled the trigger on Houdini. According to Hobbs, they were driving around and waiting for a dude to show up and buy a kilo of cocaine from Lord. Hobbs claimed that Lord got freaked out by Houdini and his homies and thought they were about to get robbed. Then shots started going off out of nowhere. Lord was murdered before the cops ever caught up to him though, and they think someone else killed Houdini. A teenager was eventually booked for the murder and went to trial, but none of the details have been released because he was a minor when the situation went down. Hobbs ended up getting convicted of second-degree murder though, and now he's serving a life sentence over Houdini's death. Houdini isn't the only rapper who got killed in a wealthy neighborhood though. Chicago's one of the deadliest cities for rappers, but nobody expected what happened in this next story. In 2020, FBG Duck was shopping in the Gold Coast neighborhood of Chicago, shopping for his son's birthday present. It was the middle of the day in one of the nicest areas of the city, but out of nowhere, 2 cars full of shooters pulled up and dumped over 40 shots at Duck. Duck repped the STL EBT set of the Gangsta Disciples and had been going to war with O-Block and the rest of the Black Disciples for years. He was one of the most popular GD rappers ever from Chicago and allegedly put crazy pressure on the BDs in the streets too. And sources say that King Von put a huge bag on his head. While Duck was shopping, a BD named TZ spotted him and called his goons to help with the murder. That's when Muwap, C-Thang, Kenny Mack, C Murder, and Los all left O-Block and rushed to the Gold Coast. Another dude named Ezel Rawls was wanted too, but he committed before the cops got to him. According to reports, Von handed out custom O-Block chains to everyone after the hit went down. Rumors were flying immediately that the BDs were behind the shooting, but it took the cops a while before they made any charges. Everyone named in the case was convicted and is facing life in prison for killing Duck. His death shocked Chicago, but what happened next was even crazier. Just a few months after Duck was killed, King Von and some other O-Block dudes were out in Atlanta. Von had been beefing with NBA Youngboy for a while and sending shots back and forth on social media. So when he spotted Youngboy's homie Quando Rondo, it was on sight. Von ran into Quando outside a hookah lounge and started swinging on him. Quando's homie Lil Tim wasn't gonna let it fly though and upped his strap. Shots started going off from both sides, and by the time it was over, Von and his homie were both dead and 6 others were rushed to the hospital with gunshot wounds. Lil Tim was booked for murder the next day and was making headlines as the dude who killed King Von. Quando Rondo was all over the news too, so he aired out the whole situation on the track End of Story and rapped, "What they say, that's understood. We had to make it home. I put that on the neighborhood before they bust my dome. Lil Timmy riding, right or wrong. And blood on your brother on the ground. Go and pick your mans up. Damn right, we screaming self-defense. He shouldn't have never put his hands on me. Look at the footage. That's all the evidence. See, them shouldn't have ran up on me." Tim fought the case for a few years, but in 2023, news broke that all the charges against Lil Tim had been dropped. And after the cops let him skate on the Von shooting, Tim dropped the track Left a Stain and rapped, "Just gotta collect call from New Pluto yesterday. He say he on the way. We steady catching plays. I told him about my good news. I'm about to beat this case." Doe B was a rapper from Montgomery, Alabama, who dropped his first project in 2012 and picked up some major attention in the industry. T.I. signed him to his label and they started working on his debut album. But then Doe B got caught up in a wild situation and was shot to death. In December 2013, Doe B was chilling at the Centennial Bar in Montgomery. The spot used to be called Rose Supper Club, and it was one of the most dangerous public spots in the city. There were all kinds of shootings there, and the owners changed their name because the reputation was so bad. but changing the name didn't fix any of the issues. It's not clear how it all started, but Doe was beefing with a dude named Jason McWilliams. Jason was there with his homie Darius Thomas, and he's the one who ended up killing Doe B that night. According to reports, a fight broke out and someone threw a bottle at Darius's head, so he upped his strap and started letting off shots. The other side started shooting back, and by the time it was over, 3 people were dead. Doe B was only 22 years old when he died, and in 2018, Darius got hit with an 85-year sentence after he pleaded guilty to killing Doe and the other 2 people who got caught up in the situation. Doe B's death was a tragedy, but this next rapper's death is even more brutal. Lil Snoop was one of the best freestylers of all time. His written verses were crazy too though, and after he snuck behind security and handed Meek Mill his mixtape, Meek hit him up 20 minutes later and immediately wanted to sign him. Meek started taking Lil Snoop to rap battles, and he was destroying dudes who had been in the game for years. Snoop was only 18, but he had crazy skills and was shocking everyone who heard him. After his first tape drops, it looked like he was going to take over the industry, but then the shocking news broke that he had been killed over a game of NBA 2K. Snoop was at his homie's apartment playing 2K and making bets. According to his friend Lil E, Snoop was playing with a dude named Tony Holden. Snoop allegedly ran the dude's pockets and kept winning, so Holden upped his strap and killed Snoop with 2 shots to the chest. Holden was already on bail when it happened, so he turned himself in and got booked for murder, armed robbery, and illegal possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Lil E was charged with manslaughter over the situation, but Snoop's mom claims that Lil E was actually the one who killed her son. In 2022, Snoop's mom went on Boss Talk 101 and broke down how the whole thing allegedly happened. According to her, Lil Snoop and Lil E went to Tony Holden's house together that day. While Snoop and Holden were gambling, E kept on clutching his strap and was making Holden nervous. Holden thought Lil E might be planning on hitting a lick on him, so he went to another room and came back with his gun. He kicked Lil E out of the spot, but Snoop stayed there with Holden. Then a few minutes later, Lil E came back banging on the door with his gun, and when Snoop opened the door and stepped out, Lil E let off a shot. Snoop ran off, but then E allegedly chased him down and killed him point blank, then robbed him. Snoop's mom said that the bullets that killed Snoop matched Lil E's gun and not Tony's, but Tony was arrested anyway because he was a convicted felon. The cops eventually dropped the case against Lil E, even though they had evidence against him. And Snoop's mom said what made it even worse is that E allegedly ended up killing someone else that same year. L.A. Capone was a rapper who came up in Chicago repping the Black Disciples. He was tight with Lil Durk, King Von, and a bunch of other famous BDs in the city, but Capone's main goal was making it in the music industry. Capone's mom sent him out to live with his dad in Atlanta, and that's when he started making connections in the industry by becoming friends with the daughters of T.I. and Lil Wayne. But after Capone's dad passed away when he was 12, Capone moved back to Chicago and started repping the BDs. He was getting some buzz on his name in the drill scene, but that just put a bigger target on his back for the ops. In 2012, they slid on him, and L.A. Capone barely survived the shooting. He didn't let it slow him down though. He was talking to T.I. about signing to his label. But then in 2013, the ops caught L.A. Capone lacking again, and tragically, he didn't make it out alive. L.A. Capone was leaving the studio with his homie one night and turned down an alley to get into his whip. That's when 2 dudes popped up out of nowhere and started letting off shots. L.A. Capone was hit in the back and the leg, and just a few hours later, he was tragically pronounced dead. There were all kinds of rumors flying about who pulled the trigger. Capone had a lot of enemies in the street, and just being affiliated with the BDs was enough to get him killed if the wrong people spotted him. Then in 2014, 2 dudes named Sakee Hardy Johnson and Michael Mays were booked for the murder. They admitted to planning the whole thing when they found out where L.A. Capone was recording that night, and they had their homie Miko Buchanan driving another whip to cause a distraction in case the cops pulled up to the scene. Chicago lost another talented artist too soon, and all 3 dudes involved with the hit went down for decades. Buchanan was given 45 years, Mays got 24, and Hardy Johnson basically got life when the judge hit him with a 60-year sentence. Chink Struggs came up rapping in Queens and had his name buzzing with his crew, the Riot Squad. He still had one foot in the trenches at the same time though, and right before they blew up, he got hit with a 5-year sentence on robbery charges. Going to prison actually didn't slow him down though. While he was locked up, Chink started making street connections and was able to link up with French Montana when he came back home. They formed a crew called the Coke Boys, and Chinks was dropping solo projects too. By 2015, he was finally about to drop his debut album, but then he was shot and killed right after a show. On May 17, 2015, Chinks had a show in Brooklyn. Everything went smooth, and after the concert, he hopped in his whip to head back home to Queens. He was driving down Queens Boulevard with his homie around 4 in the morning, and when they stopped at a red light, another car pulled up next to him, and a shooter dumped their whole clip. Chinks was rushed to the hospital, but he got hit 8 times and tragically didn't pull through. His death shocked the rap game, and nobody had any idea why he was killed. Chinks came up in the streets and spent some time in prison, but but it seemed like he had left it all behind and was just focused on being a rapper. Then over 2 years later, there was finally a break in the case, and the true story behind his death shocked everyone. It turned out that back in 2009, while Chinks was locked up on Rikers Island, he got into a fight with another rapper named Quincy Homer, aka Quality. Reports say that Chinks beat him up pretty badly, and that Quality held a grudge for years. 1 month before Chinks was killed, Quality showed up at his concert in Philly, and they got into some kind of fight. It's not clear exactly what happened, but the cops think that Quality might have been jealous that his rap career never took off and Chinks was blowing up. So Quality and his homie Jamar Hill allegedly pulled up to Brooklyn and followed Chinks all the way to Queens before they killed him. They were both arrested for second-degree murder, but it's not clear where the case is at right now. Bankroll Fresh started blowing up in Atlanta and was working with massive artists like Gucci Mane and 2 Chainz. But before he could really hit the mainstream, Bankroll Fresh sparked a wild shootout that ended up getting them killed. Bankroll Fresh was tight with another rapper in the city named No Plug. They had known each other since they were 10 years old, but then some street drama got in the way. It's not clear exactly what happened, but in 2015, the situation started going left. According to rumors, No Plug and Bankroll Fresh already had some issues over a woman. It wasn't anything serious though, and Bankroll Fresh pulled up to No Plug's hood during a Thanksgiving turkey drive that No Plug's cousin was hosting. No Plug and his crew weren't cool with Bankroll Fresh just showing up like that without checking in first, so they asked him to leave, and that's what allegedly sparked the issue. A few months later, No Plug was at the studio when Bankroll Fresh showed up and tried to press him over the turkey drive situation. No Plug tried to just let the situation go and leave, but Bankroll Fresh grabbed him and they ended up falling down the staircase together. Someone stepped in to separate them, but unfortunately, that's not where it ended. No Plug got out of the studio, but realized he left 2 cell phones inside. When he went back inside to grab them, Bankroll Fresh and his crew allegedly already had their guns out and were ready for smoke. Bankroll Fresh allegedly fired the first shot, then both sides got into a wild shootout with bullets flying all over the place. By the time they were all done, there were over 50 shell casings on the ground, and Bankroll Fresh was bleeding out. The murder case was open for a couple years, but eventually the cops decided it wasn't a homicide. They never released the name of whoever actually shot Bankroll Fresh, but the cops say No Plug shot back in self-defense, and that Bankroll Fresh is the one who kicked the whole situation off. G Money was NBA Youngboy's mentor in the rap game. Then they sparked a beef that led to G Money getting killed outside the studio by one of Youngboy's homies. G Money and Youngboy both repped a crew called TBG back in the day, but then Youngboy split off and started his own crew, NBA. It's not clear what really started the drama, but part of it is that G Money hooked up with Youngboy's sister and was bragging about it on Instagram. And on the track Pour One, Youngboy rapped, "Remember smoking weed with your little brother? Matter of fact, I used to call you my big brother. Then you did some foul shit and had sex with my sister and threw it in my face in front of people on Insta." G Money then clapped back with the track Industry and rapped, "Had me looking for your cousin, he wanted to kill you. I put a 30 up under my pistol. Your sister swallowed nut, so I never kissed her. But I fucked with her, so I never dissed her." And on the unreleased freestyle, he took more shots at Youngboy with the bar, "Got love for him, sister, I can't get him killed. Even though you went to trip him when you got a deal. You was my son, let's keep it G. Just because you know how to rap, don't make you no killer." NBA Youngboy wasn't rocking with the disrespect. In less than a month after G Money dissed him, Youngboy's homie NBA Pap allegedly caught G outside the studio and killed him. NBA Youngboy and his homies were the #1 suspects from the jump, but it took the cops 4 years to make an arrest. In 2021, they brought Pap in for questioning and kept him there for 3 days. Pap told the feds he was out of town when G Money got hit up, but his cell phone records proved he was in Baton Rouge when the murder happened. Pap ended up taking a plea deal to get the charge lowered to accessory after the fact to murder. He still got hit with a 5-year sentence, but that's way less time than if he took it to trial and lost. Smoke Dogg was coming up in the Toronto rap game and had the potential to become a star. But before he got the chance, another rapper killed him in the middle of the street. It's still not clear how everything went down, but on June 30th, 2018, Smoke Dogg was chilling outside a nightclub in Toronto with his manager, Cobra Prime. At some point, a Toronto rapper named 21 Neat came up to the spot, and that's when everything started. Neat and Smoke Dogg had some drama going on behind the scenes, but nobody really knows what it was about. Rumors say that it wasn't really personal though, and the crews were the ones who really had beef. According to some reports, Neat came up and clowned Smoke for getting his chain snatched. He also allegedly flicked his cigarette at Smoke Dogg, and that's when Smoke Dogg upped his strap and fired some warning shots into the air. Neat and his homie ducked behind the car, then after Smoke Dogg was done shooting, Neat upped his strap and busted back. At some point, Smoke Dogg tried to run away from the situation, but Neat caught up to him and shot Smoke Dogg to death. Cobra Prime got hit in the neck and tragically died too. Plus another bystander got caught in the shooting and had to be rushed to the hospital too. After the cops caught up to him, Neat pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, but the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder, and now he's serving a life sentence. Young Greatness came up in New Orleans, but moved to Houston in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina destroyed the city. He caught a couple drug possession charges back in the day, but Young Greatness never really hopped off the porch and started gangbanging, and that's why his death was so shocking. In 2018, Young Greatness went back to his hometown for a funeral and linked up with a dude named Donald Rowe to buy weed. They met up at a Waffle House and everything was smooth at first, but Young Greatness had no idea that the whole thing was a setup. Rowe had given Lovance Wicks and Donnie Maxwell a couple of pistols and told them to wait outside the Waffle House. When Young Greatness finished the deal and came out of the restaurant, Wicks and Maxwell hopped out to rob him, and that's when Maxwell upped the strap and killed Young Greatness. The cops were able to track Wicks and Maxwell down using surveillance footage, and later they booked Donald Rowe over the situation too. Wicks pleaded guilty to armed robbery and other charges a year later and got hit with a 20-year sentence, and Maxwell admitted to pulling the trigger on Young Greatness. Maxwell hasn't been sentenced yet, but in January 2023, Donald Rowe was convicted of second-degree murder for putting the whole thing together and got hit with a mandatory life sentence. A lot of rappers get back to the community after they make it big in the game, but nobody did as much for the city as Nipsey Hussle. He came up repping the Rollin' 60s Crips and knew all about the street life, and after he made it in the rap game, he wanted to keep other dudes out of the trenches. Nip funded schools, gave people jobs, and was trying to find ways to stop gang violence in LA, and that's what made his murder even more tragic. On March 31st, 2019, Nip was standing outside his Marathon clothing store in South Central LA. He was talking to another Rollin' 60 named Eric Holder that he had known for years, but then the situation turned left. According to witnesses, there were rumors going around that Eric Holder had snitched on someone and word was getting around the streets. Nip was just trying to warn Holder about the situation and let him know that people were talking, but Holder got so heated about it that he hopped in the car with his girlfriend and they drove off. They didn't get far before Holder told his girl to stop the car though, and that's when he hopped out with a gun and walked back over to Nip. Eric Holder upped the strap and shot Nip 10 times, then kicked him in the head after he hit the ground. Holder was arrested a month later, but some dudes on the inside almost took him out before he made it to trial. Nipsey Hussle was one of the most well-respected guys in LA, and when Eric Holder got locked up, a bunch of dudes jumped him and sliced him up with razors. Holder survived the attack, but now he's serving 60 years for first-degree murder. It's not uncommon for rappers to get caught up in bad situations and end up getting killed, but Vino Gunna's story is more tragic than most. One day he was chilling in the studio when one of his nieces called him and said that an older dude was harassing her and her friends. A 42-year-old dude named Christopher Rainey was messing with Vino's niece, so Vino rode up to the scene to see what was up. According to witnesses, Vino and Rainey started arguing and then Vino punched him in the face. That's when Rainey pulls out a gun and let off 2 shots in the air, so Vino backed off. Witnesses say the situation could have ended there, but while Vino was trying to walk away, Rainey shot him in the chest. After he killed Vino, Rainey went on the run for a couple of days. It didn't take long for the cops to track him down though, and they found the gun that killed Vino in his backpack. Rainey admitted that he killed Vino, but claimed it was self-defense. The cops weren't buying the story though, and Rainey ended up getting booked for second-degree murder. It's not clear where the case stands today, but St. Louis lost a talented artist over nothing. EBE Bands made waves in the industry for being a white drill rapper from Chicago who allegedly had ties to the Black P Stones. He made headlines back in the day for an interview with DJ Vlad, because in the middle of the interview, Bands pulled out a gun and showed everyone that he was really about that life. Bands wanted to let everyone know, but in 2019, 3 dudes caught him lacking and brutally executed him. It's not clear why it happened, but one day Bands walked inside someone's house and 3 dudes were waiting for him. When he came through the door, a dude named Colton Kenneker smashed EBE Bands in the head with a baseball bat. Then his homies Dakota Graff and William Marzate jumped in and helped Kenneker beat Bands to death. They weren't done yet though. After they killed Bands, the 3 of them took his body into the woods and set it on fire. Even though they tried to hide their tracks, all 3 of them were convicted of murder. Graff and Kenneker both got hit with over 30 years, and Arzate was handed a life sentence. Graff and Kenneker have been locked up ever since. Arzate posted bond in 2019 and did the race though, and the cops have been looking for him for years. Mo 3 was one of the hottest street rappers in Dallas. He had a wild come up in the trenches and spent time in prison on robbery charges. And when he came back home, he sparked some wild beef in the industry with dudes like Yella Beezy and Trap Boy Freddy. Mo 3 was involved with some crazy situations and allegedly even shot a couple dudes outside of a club once. But nobody expected him to go out the way he did. In November 2020, Mo 3 had just left a woman's crib and was driving home. He noticed someone following him though, so he hit the highway to smash off. The ops were right behind him though, so Mo 3 stopped the whip and ran to his passenger side to grab a gun. By the time he had his own strap, the ops were already down on him though, so Mo 3 tried to take off on foot. Unfortunately, he didn't have anywhere to go though, and a gunman chased him down and left him dead in the middle of the road. After the news about his death broke, fans immediately thought Yella Beezy or Trap Boy Freddy were involved with the murder, But according to Mo3's manager, Brian Rainwater, the situation didn't have anything to do with rap beef. Rainwater says that Mo3 was hooking up with a woman, and her baby daddy got jealous and decided to take him out. Kewan White and Devin Brown were both booked for the murder, but it's not clear which one of them was the baby daddy. The case hasn't gone to trial yet, but White is already serving 9 years on a different gun charge and could end up getting the death penalty if the Mo3 trial doesn't go his way. When Young Dolph was brutally murdered in his hometown of Memphis, people immediately started pointing fingers at Yo Gotti and the CMG crew. Gotti and Dolph have been beefing for years. Gotti's artist Black Youngsta allegedly tried to kill Dolph in North Carolina, and someone else in Gotti's crew shot Dolph in the arm when they ran into each other in LA. It took a while before there was any movement in the case, but then the cops booked Cornelius Smith and Justin Johnson for murdering Young Dolph. Then another dude named Jamarcus Johnson was also booked for being an accessory after the fact. It didn't seem like any of them had direct ties to Gotti, but then the cops made another arrest that changed everything. They booked a dude named Hernandez Govan for allegedly putting a hit out on Dolph, and it turns out he was cool with Gotti's brother, Big Juke. The two of them were spotted in pictures together, and rumors said they had street ties that ran deep. There's a chance Juke might have been wrapped up in the murder case too, but then he was murdered in broad daylight right after his uncle's funeral. Juke isn't the only suspect who ended up dead though. The cops listed a dude named Joshua Taylor as a person of interest. He wasn't an official suspect, and it's not clear why they thought he was involved. But in June 2023, Taylor was found shot to death. Govan, Cornelius Smith, and Justin Johnson could all end up facing life in prison, but there's no telling who else will get caught up in a situation when the trial finally starts. Dolph isn't the only dead rapper that Yo Gotti is linked to though, and this next story is all about the mysterious murder of one of his artists. Snooty Wild came up in Memphis and eventually signed a Yo Gotti CMG label. His career never popped off that crazy, but he had a lot of loyal fans and worked with some of the biggest artists in the game. Snooty Wild wasn't in the news for a long time, but then out of nowhere, the story broke that he had been found dead in a ditch next to the highway in Texas. According to what she told the cops, a woman got her vehicle stuck in the ditch and a bunch of people stopped to help her. Then for some reason, she said Snooty Wild walked up and pointed a gun at her, so she ran away. That's when she heard a gunshot and called 911. When the cops rolled up to the scene, they found Snooty Wild bleeding out from a gunshot to the neck, and a day later, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The whole situation didn't make any sense, and Snooty Wild's son started investigating the case himself. He even hired a private detective to help him out, and they found a dude named Ivory Duke Williams allegedly bragging about the shooting on social media. Snooty Wild's family took the evidence to the cops, but it still ended up taking months for the cops to do anything about it. Almost a year after Snooty Wild's death, the police finally booked Ivory Duke Williams and charged him with murder. It's still not clear what went down that night, but it turns out that Williams and the woman who called the police are actually cousins. There's definitely more to this story that'll come out when the trial starts, so tap in for updates. It's not rare for rappers to get killed over street politics, but sometimes they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Trouble was a rapper from Atlanta who worked with superstars like Drake and Quavo. He left all the street drama behind him after he made it in the industry, but unfortunately, he still ended up getting killed. One night in 2022, Trouble was sleeping at a woman's house when her ex Jamichael Jones broke in and started punching her in the face. Apparently, he had no idea that anyone else was in the crib with her, but Trouble woke up and started fighting him. Trouble and the woman were both beating him up, but then Jamichael upped the strap and shot Trouble in the chest. After he shot Trouble, Jamichael ran out of the apartment, but the cops were onto him from the jump. They went to his mom's house, and she's the one who put Jamichael on the phone with them. He decided to turn himself in a couple days later, and now he's facing a felony murder charge. According to his ex, she had broken up with Jamichael about a week before the shooting because he wasn't working or paying any bills. He punched her that day, and she called the cops, but she never actually finished the police report. Trouble lost his life over the situation, but his death could be the only reason the woman is still alive. Jamichael broke in that night with a gun, and if Trouble wasn't there when he started attacking her, there's a good chance she'd be dead right now. The truth about who killed Tupac was the biggest mystery in the rap game for decades, but now we finally know more about the dudes who killed him, and there have been some shocking new updates. While Pac and Biggie were going to war in the industry, the beef in the streets was already getting violent. Biggie and Diddy were tight with the Southside Crips in Compton, while Pac and Suge Knight were surrounded by the Mob Piru Bloods. It all started with a Southside Crip getting pressed at Lakewood Mall by some Death Row affiliates. A dude named Trey and some other Bloods tried to check the dude, but then some Crips came around the corner and put hands on them and snatched a Death Row chain from Trey. One of the Southside affiliates at the mall that day was a dude named Orlando Anderson. Anderson wasn't just another street-level thug though. His uncle is Keefy D, a member of the Southside OGs, and that's why Pac ended up dead just a few weeks later. Orlando Anderson was a fan of Pac and allegedly went to the MGM Grand in Vegas because he knew Pac was going to be there. Trey was rolling with Pac that night though. And after he pointed out Anderson as one of the dudes who was responsible for the chain snatching, Hawk walked up to Orlando and threw a punch. Orlando got stomped out by the whole Death Row crew, and that's when he went back to his uncle Keefe D and the rest of the Crips who were in Vegas. Diddy's homie Zip allegedly gave him a .40 caliber Glock to clap back at Death Row. Then the Crips hit the streets looking for Tupac and Suge. Keefe D, Orlando Anderson, and 2 other Southside affiliates named Big Dre and Bubble Up were driving down the Las Vegas Strip when they spotted Pac and Suge's whip. They pulled up on them and got ready to take Pac out, and this is where the story gets complicated. According to Keefe, he passed the Glock to Big Dre because he had the best shot. Dre didn't want to do it though, so Orlando took the strap and leaned out the window and did it himself. Keefe eventually got busted for running a massive drug ring and was facing life in prison, but he skated on the charges and made a deal to tell the cops all about Tupac's murder. Keefe wrote about the situation in his book and got a lot of attention for talking about it in interviews. But then in 2023, the case took a shocking turn. During one of his interviews with DJ Vlad brought up a witness statement that went against Keefe's story. And as soon as Vlad started talking about it, you can see Keefe get really uncomfortable.
What witnesses were saying, though, was that when they saw the arm stick out the window and do the shooting, it wasn't a skinny arm. It was a bulky, hefty-looking arm.
Well, I was in the passenger seat.
I'm not saying it's you. I'm saying that there's 4 people in the car, but it wasn't a skinny arm that stuck his hand out the window.
Who the witness?
Can't say.
Okay, they lying?
People close to the situation knew something was going on behind the scenes. Reggie Wright Jr. was the head of Death Row Security, and he said that there was activity in the case and that Keefe was definitely scared because the cops were onto him. The news broke that Keefe's crib was raided by the cops and they took out all kinds of evidence to use against him. Just a few weeks later, Keefe was officially booked for Pac's murder. Biggie was murdered a few months after Pac, and according to street rumors, this is the terrifying killer who took him out. Wardell Poochie Foose moved to Compton when he was a teenager and got active in the streets immediately. One day he lost a fist fight with another kid from the neighborhood, so Poochie went home and grabbed a shotgun. His stepdad drove him to the ops crib, and that's when Poochie stuck the gun out the window and let a shot off into the crib. Poochie started repping the Looters Park Power Rules. They were tied with the mob Power Rules that Suge was affiliated with. Poochie eventually linked up with Suge and allegedly killed Biggie for him. But first, Poochie committed a murder that proved he was the most brutal killer in the crew. In 1991, Poochie and his homie Floyd Boyd broke into a dude's crib named Paris Eugene Reeves. Poochie and Floyd put guns in Paris and his girlfriend's faces, then tied their hands and feet together and taped their mouths shut. They dragged Paris into another room and started beating him up. Then they upped their straps and brutally executed him. Then after Paris was dead, Poochie and Floyd walked back into the other room and shot his girlfriend in the head. A few years later, Poochie was working for Suge Knight and allegedly killed a dude named William Rat Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe was affiliated with the Bounty Hunter Bloods, but he wanted to become a rapper and sign with Death Row. Suge turned him down a few times though, so Ratcliffe rode up on Suge one day with 10 of his homies to threaten him. Suge wasn't going to let anyone press him like that and didn't take the threat lightly, so he allegedly gave Poochie the green light to take him out. The next day, Ratcliffe was found shot to death in the middle of the street. According to rumors, Poochie was like Suge's personal hitman. Anytime Suge really needed someone gone, he called up Poochie and the situation got taken care of. After Tupac was killed, Suge got locked up for violating his probation. According to a detective named Greg Kading, Suge used his girlfriend, Teresa Swan, to get in touch with Poochie in order to hit on Biggie. Teresa acted like she was Suge's lawyer's assistant, which meant the cops couldn't film the conversation. And that's how Suge was allegedly able to put the green light on Biggie from behind bars. The rumor is Suge gave Poochie $13K to take Biggie out, and Poochie did his job again. But by the time Kading figured everything out, Poochie was already dead. In 2003, Poochie was riding his motorcycle around the city when the ops caught him lacking and shot him 10 times in the back. Poochie died before he could face any charges for Biggie's murder, but pretty much everyone close to the situation agrees he's the one who pulled the trigger. According to Mob James, an OG from the Mob Power Rules, Poochie was a known killer, and it was pretty much known information that he's the one who murdered Biggie.
Was Poochie known as a shooter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a hitter for real, for real.
Poochie is the only alleged killer that ended up dead before the cops got to him though. Back in the 90s, Big L was one of the hottest rappers in New York. He was making major moves in the industry, but then out of nowhere, he was allegedly murdered by his own homie. Big L was never super active in the streets, but his older brother Lee was one of the most feared dudes in the neighborhood. Lee got hit with a 5-year sentence for a gun charge, and that's why Big L ended up dead. Before he went inside, Lee was beefing with a dude named Gerard Woodley. Woodley and Big L were close back in the day, and Woodley was even on the back of Big L's album cover. According to rumors, Big L's brother Lee put a bag on Woodley's head, and the shooter brought Big L with him to point Woodley out. They slid on Woodley, but he got away and allegedly saw Big L with the shooter. Then a week later, Big L was shot 9 times in the head and chest. Woodley was booked for his murder, but the case was eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. Almost 2 decades went by before anything else happened, but then in 2016, Woodley was shot to death on the exact same street. Cameron was cool with Big L back in the day, so fans were shocked when he was spotted at Woodley's funeral. After he caught a lot of heat on social media, Cam hopped on Instagram and raps, 139 Park, we started off as children, grew up with Big L, and the dude who supposedly killed him. A week before that though, Big L tried to kill him. What was he to do? Please don't be in your feelings. When the time is right, I will tell you about these villains. Now everybody dead, so it ain't about squilling. Big L isn't the only dude Woodley allegedly killed though. Woodley was a suspect in 4 other murders, and eventually, all the street drama caught up to him and left him dead on the same street as his old homie. But Big L isn't the only New York legend who allegedly got killed by someone he knew. Jam Master Jay was one of the most influential dudes in rap history. He was the DJ for Run DMC and helped launch rap into the mainstream. But in 2002, he was brutally murdered at his own studio. Jay was at the spot chilling with a couple homies when 2 dudes buzzed into the building and went straight to the studio. They came in with guns and masks and told everyone to get on the floor. Then before anyone even knew what was happening, one of them shot Jay in the head and one of his homies in the leg. His death was a massive shock to the rap game. Jay was known as one of the most positive dudes in the industry who was always trying to keep people out of the streets. So him getting murdered like that was crazy. When it first went down, rumors were flying that a dude named Kenneth Supreme McGriff was involved with the hit. Jay had been working with 50 Cent, who was on Supreme's bad side after 50 aired out Supreme's business on the track Ghetto Quran and rapped, "Yo, when you hear talk of the South Side, you hear talk of the team. See, feared Prince and respected Preem. For all you slow, I'ma break it down iller. See, Preem was the businessman and Prince was the killer. Remember, he used to push the bulletproof BM. Supreme wanted to blackball 50 in the industry. So when Jam Master Jay kept working with 50, it made some people think that Supreme put the green light on Jay's head. Supreme was investigated for a while over the murder, but there wasn't any evidence against him. And that's when the story gets even more complicated. A year after Jam Master Jay's death, a journalist named Frank Owen claimed that it was all over a drug deal that went left. The news was crazy to fans because Jay was always keeping people out of the streets, but then the arrest happened. In 2020, Ronald Washington and Carl Jordan Jr. were both booked for Jay's murder. And this is how it allegedly went down. Jam Master Jay owed a lot of money to the IRS, and his career wasn't popping like back in the day, so he linked up with Ronald and Carl to sell cocaine. Jay drove up to Washington and picked up $250,000 worth of coke from a plug named Uncle, who was allegedly associated with the Black Mafia family. According to Ronald and Carl, Jam Master Jay was supposed to split the cocaine with them, but for some reason, they had a falling out, and Jay cut him out of the deal. And according to some sources, that's why Ronald and Carl came to the studio that day and murdered him. Then in 2023, a third dude named Jay Bryant was also picked up in the murder case. He was allegedly spotted leaving the studio right after Jam Master Jay died, and his DNA was at the scene. Then he also allegedly even admitted to being involved with the situation. All 3 of them are facing trial right now and could end up with life in prison. Soulja Slim came up selling heroin and cocaine in New Orleans before he hopped in the booth and linked up with No Limit Records. He started popping off in the industry in the late 90s, but still had one foot in the trenches and got booked for armed robbery. A few years later, Slim came back and hit #1 on the charts with his homie Juvenile. His name was buzzing like crazy in the rap game, but then he was brutally executed outside his mom's home. According to rumors, Slim never left the streets and allegedly robbed and killed another rapper in the city. Some people think Slim caught over 5 bodies while he was in the trenches, but this one allegedly got him killed. One of the rapper's homies wasn't happy about his friend getting taken out and allegedly put $10K on Slim's head. Not long after the hit was placed, Slim was shot 3 times in the face and once in the head right outside his mom's house. And a month later, the cops booked a man named Jarrell Smith for the murder. When they found him, Jarrell was carrying a stolen gun that matched the description of the gun that killed Slim. Nobody ever came forward to testify though, so Jarrell skated on the charges. He allegedly killed at least 3 other people after Slim, but every time the cops booked him, they couldn't find enough evidence to convict him. Then in 2011, Jarrell was found shot to death. DJ Vlad interviewed Juvenile about Slim's murder and tried to bring up Jarrell's name, but Juvenile shut him down immediately and said he wasn't going to talk about that because putting names out there publicly can be dangerous.
There was an investigation into his murder, and someone named Jarrell Smith.
We ain't gonna do that one either. Cause I'm still in the city, bro. I'm still riding through the city, and I don't like saying people's names and putting people out. I don't like doing that. That's dangerous.
Street rumors say that Slim's homie killed Jarrell to get revenge, and that's why Juvenile doesn't want to spark any more drama. But nobody really knows what went down behind the scenes. What we do know is that Soulja Slim's murder ended up getting another rapper from the city killed too soon. Magnolia Shorty and her homie Miss T were the first women who ever signed with Cash Money Records. She was tight with Soulja Slim, and he's actually the one who gave her the nickname Magnolia Shorty. Shorty was also tight with a dude named Man Man, who repped a crew called the Front of Town Killers and was allegedly trying to get revenge for Slim's death. Magnolia Shorty wasn't really involved with the beef, but that didn't stop Soulja Slim and Man Man's ops from killing her. In December 2010, Magnolia Shorty and Man Man were in a whip pulling up to her apartment when another car came from behind and blocked them in. Before Shorty and Man Man could do anything, 2 shooters hopped out and dumped over 50 rounds into the whip and killed them both. For years, nobody knew who was behind the shooting. But then in 2014, the FBI got involved and 4 dudes from a set called the 39ers were indicted. 2 of the 4, named Biscuit and Freaky, admitted they were there when Magnolia Shorty and Man Man got killed. And in 2017, a jury found their other 2 homies, Rat and T-Red, guilty of the murders. In September 2022, the rap game was shocked by the news that PNB Rock had been shot and killed by a teenager in LA. PNB Rock was having lunch with his girlfriend at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles when a 17-year-old came in and upped a strap in his face. PNB Rock had a bunch of jewelry on, and the teenager told him to hand it over, but then he shot PNB Rock in the chest. After PNB Rock hit the ground, the teenager shot him 2 more times. Then he pointed the gun at PNB Rock's girlfriend and threatened to shoot her in the head. He took all of PNB Rock's jewelry off his body while he was bleeding out in front of everyone, then ran out of the restaurant and hopped in a getaway car. It was a tragic situation already, but nobody expected what happened next. A dude named Freddie Lee Trone was arrested for the murder, but his son is actually the one who pulled the trigger. Freddie's wife Chantel was booked too. According to the police, someone inside the restaurant named Tremont Jones spotted PNB Rock wearing a lot of ice and called up Freddie. Freddie came to the restaurant and talked to Jones outside, then left to pick up his son and came back. He dropped his son off by the restaurant and waited for him in the whip, and after the mission was done, they left together. Then someone named Juanisha Evans allegedly drove Freddie to Las Vegas so he could lay low after the murder. Nobody's gone to trial yet, but Freddie, his wife, and their son were all allegedly involved, so the entire family may end up behind bars by the time the case settles.